Hey guys, Artaru's here. A few weeks back, I asked you guys to send me any questions or queries you had regarding storyboarding and working in the industry. Well, now I'm going to go through as many of these questions as I can and give you some hopefully helpful answers. Whilst I'm going through your questions, I thought I'd also show you a bit of a live draw of my latest animatic so you can have a little bit of an insight into my process. With that being said, let's get on to the questions. How long does it take for you to do your animatics? It all depends on the complexity of the animatic. Having lots of characters, movement and detailed backgrounds obviously takes a lot longer to draw up, and can also make the animatic take more time to export. I also tend to go a bit overboard with making my animatics look clean and pretty, so that just adds on time. When I first started making these animatics for YouTube, I was working freelance, and I had a lot more spare time on my hands, so I could usually finish an animatic within a month. But now as I'm working a full-time job, I can only really work on weekends, and even then I can only do that sparingly as I need to have time away from the computer for my physical and mental health. I get quite bad wrist pain if I do too much drawing or computer work, so I need to allow myself time to rest so I don't do any serious damage. Is this something you've always wanted to do? I knew I wanted to be some form of artist from an early age, as it was the one thing I seemed to be good at in school. I started considering a field in film and animation in my college years, after trying out different areas of art and design like fine art and graphics. I briefly dabbled around with concept art and character design, and it wasn't until my first year of uni that I actually considered storyboarding as a career choice. I had applied for a few animation and illustration courses when looking at unis, as I knew I wanted to work in animation in some form or another, but I just wasn't sure what yet. I mainly picked the illustration course I ended up doing as it had a film and animation strand. This way I could still explore other areas of illustration, but I had the option to go down the animation path if I wanted to. When did you first start making storyboards and how long were they? I made my first proper storyboard in my first year of university, when we were given a brief to plan and create a short animatic based on an existing children's book that we initially had to illustrate and then adapt into an animated short. I did the initial storyboarding in Adobe Flash, and then drew the final animatic by hand and painted it. To be fair, doing it this way probably wasn't the smartest move time-wise, but I wanted it to look similar to the illustrations I'd done previously. I think we were given about 2 weeks to create this, but I can't quite remember off the top of my head. So I spent the first week planning and making the initial animatic, and then the second week drawing and painting everything up, scanning it in and putting it together in the video editing program Adobe Premiere. The final animatic itself was just over 2 minutes long. I made a few other animatics during my time at uni, but that was the one that started it all. Did you get training on this subject? I studied illustration at university, but we did explore different areas such as illustration for the screen and comic book illustration. In my first year we were asked to put together an animatic as part of a larger brief, and they did a little talk about it. Mostly I learned from watching other people's animatics, reading books about storyboarding and just practicing. Luckily in my third year of illustration they let us set our own briefs, so I did a bit of experimenting with comic books and storyboarding. I did a fair bit of researching how to go about putting a good storyboard together. What animatic are you most proud of? The Get Ready to Die Gravity Falls fan animatic was probably one of my most complex animatics I had made at the time. I'd been putting off making it as I just thought it would be too much and didn't feel confident enough that I could do the idea justice. I kind of threw myself into making it pretty blind, with only a basic idea of how it was going to work. It was also one of the most animated animatics I had made at the time, and I was just thrilled in the end that I'd managed to pull it off. Any recommendations for a portfolio? Have a few different portfolios for different areas of film and animation. Even if you just plan to go for a storyboarding job or you just want to work in children's animation, it's worth having a few different portfolios for specific jobs. For example, if you're going for a storyboarding job at a studio that focuses mainly on TV adverts or live action, then you want your portfolio to show that you can do that. Make sure you have some strong storyboards and thumbnails, but also have some examples of other areas like life drawing and character design, as you may not get the storyboarding job, but they may have another job going for a character artist. Always research the company you are applying for to see what work they produce. They may ask you why you want to work for them in an interview, and even if they don't, it's good to show that you've done your research. Also, here is a huge tip. If you're applying for a storyboarding job, make sure your portfolio and website actually has storyboards. I know it seems like an obvious thing, but the amount of portfolios I went through when I was helping out finding a new story intern that didn't have any storyboards was crazy. Also, make sure you have a good variety of storyboards and animatics that clearly communicate the narrative and show that you have a good understanding of composition and camera angles. Finally, try not to be too flat on with your camera angles, and make sure you're consistent throughout and everything flows. What are the cons of this career choice? It is quite a competitive field to get into, and most jobs want you to have experience, which is difficult when you need the job to get the experience in the first place. What are some smart things to study while in high school if you want to get into the industry? Art is a big one, of course. Animation too, as they will usually teach you how to storyboard as part of the process, and you'll get a basic understanding of timing and movement. Life drawing is also another important one I'd also recommend if you can. It is such a good way to get used to drawing the human form and understand perspective and anatomy. For a beginning artist who wants to learn how to storyboard/animate, how do you learn and develop? Watch some films and TV series and see how they set up their compositions. Try and recreate them in rough thumbnails to get a hang of different camera angles and creating storyboards quickly. And just keep practicing. You can get free scripts online to work from if you need an idea to get started, and try to be very loose and quick with your drawings. Focus more on getting the ideas down than making them look pretty. There are also lots of good tutorials and books out there that will teach you the basics to get you started. With all your experience, what advice would you give to someone wanting to work in the industry? Make as many connections as you can. If possible, go to animation events and introduce yourself to as many potential employers as you can. Also, do your research. Find out what companies are looking for and make sure your portfolio clearly shows appropriate work for the company you are applying for. How did you go from graduating to working as a storyboard artist? Were there any jobs before that, and do companies find you or do you contact them? After I graduated, I spent a year working freelance and building my portfolio, whilst also applying for internships and junior positions. Some of the freelance jobs included a series of animation for a video game company and a load of vector illustrations for a mental health app. With the freelance jobs, I was typically contacted by the client, who had seen my work either online or through an exhibit I had done with my university. I managed to get an interview for a storyboard internship and got through to the final 3, but I was told I was slightly overqualified for the position as they were mainly looking for someone straight out of university who had no prior experience. But they still said they were interested in my work and would keep my details on file if anything came up in the future. And a few months later I got another interview for a junior position and was offered the job. I know you do a lot of fan animatics, so my question is, can fan animatics go into your portfolio, or does everything have to be 100% original? I have all my fan animatics on my website and a few in my portfolio, so I'd say it's fine to have your fan work in your portfolio. One of the people who interviewed me for my current job actually brought up my Gravity Falls animatic in my interview, so I'm sure it'd be fine. I wouldn't have too much fan work though, as you want to show you have your own ideas. Have your own original work as the main focus, but sprinkle in a few appropriate fan pieces here and there. It won't hurt, and it just shows that you're flexible to other art styles. If you're unsure, maybe research the company you want to apply for first and see. Sometimes they have guidelines for what they want to see in a portfolio, and you can usually tell if any fan work would be appropriate or not by looking at the work they produce. Does your family support your work as a storyboard artist and making YouTube videos? Both my parents are artists themselves, and while they are from a more technical field of art, they support what I do and watch my animatics on my YouTube channel. Have you ever started an animatic that you decided to retire or change the song/theme at the last minute? I had a Gravity Falls animatic that I started, with a possessed dipper singing the song Alive from the Jekyll and Hyde the musical, that I put on the back burner because it was quite complicated and I wanted to finish a shorter one first. In the end, I just never got back to it. I also had another My Little Pony video which was thumbed out and I had started cleaning up, but life got in the way and I eventually just lost interest in it. I don't think I've ever changed the song, but I have altered the story slightly in a couple animatics to make it flow better, or to make it work with the official canon storyline. How was your search for jobs related to storyboarding, and any advice for recently graduated animators? It took a long time and most companies I applied for never got back to me. With my current job, I actually initially applied for a summer internship position, and was told I was overqualified as I'd been working freelance, but they said they liked my work and that they'd keep my portfolio on file if anything came up. And eventually they did get back to me to offer me a junior position. What programs do you use to create your art in animatics? I use Toon Boom Storyboard Pro to draw my animatics, and then Adobe Premiere to put it all together and do any cleanup or effects. I use Paint Tool SAI or Photoshop to do any illustrations. Do you have to work your way up to a storyboarder? As it is quite a competitive market, you might have to start off as an intern or maybe a runner for the company just to get your toe in the door. I started off as a junior storyboard artist and worked as a junior for a year, mainly helping out with cleanups and fixes. Eventually I started storyboarding full episodes by myself and now I'm officially a full storyboard artist. What does a day in the job look like for you, and have you worked in a studio? I do currently work in a studio. Depending on where we are in our schedule, I'll either be helping out with cleanup and fixes, being briefed on a new episode, or working on my own episode. If I'm working on fixes, I'll start by looking at the latest proof animatics, where we'll have all the notes from the client or our leads and split up the notes between us. If I'm being briefed, I would typically spend most of the day going through the script with a story lead and episode lead, and we'll bounce ideas off each other and roughly thumb out the episode. If I'm working on my own episode, I'll either be setting up the shot with the 3D models or I'll be drawing out the panels. What's the best way to put your art out there? There are many good social media platforms that you can use to put your work out there. I started off with a website called DeviantArt, and there is one that a few people at work use called ArtStation, which I haven't used myself, but it seems like a good professional site. Try out a few till you find one that you're comfortable with. Why did you decide to use that specific program to do your animatics? I chose to work with Toon Boom Storyboard Pro as it is the industry standard and lots of companies I was applying for used it. Even the company I work for now uses it. I just found it really easy to use and it gave me lots of freedom to explore my animatics. It was also a really good piece of software to learn for potential job opportunities, and I could put it as a skill on my CV. When and how did you figure out that storyboarding is what you want to do as a career and not just as a side hobby? As I mentioned before, I did my first proper storyboard in my first year of university, and from that point on I was really interested in exploring it further. I was also looking into character design, children's book illustration and creating comics. I hadn't quite decided which route I wanted to go with yet, so I tried out each area with each new brief. In the end, I just found storyboarding more enjoyable. I still dabble in character design and comics every now and then, and use it to bulk out my portfolio and keep my options open. I am a teen with extremely limited resources. Nevertheless, I want to learn to animate and storyboard. Where would you suggest starting? Like comics, short animatics, eventually leading to longer animatics. Where should I start? Starting with comics is a good idea as it gets you used to composition and creating a flowing narrative. I'd recommend looking at some tutorials online and watching some animatics of scenes from films or TV shows to see how different studios do their storyboards. There are plenty of helpful books out there that will teach you the basics and answer any questions you may have far better than I could. If you have any specific questions, you can message me on my Instagram or Tumblr accounts to ask me directly, and I'll also attach a few links to some good books and websites that helped me when I was starting off. Why did you decide to make animatics instead of animation? Animation is very time consuming. I barely have enough time to make animatics as it is between work and my social life. I also don't feel confident enough to try and animate fully as it is something I'm still slowly learning to do. Do you hand draw characters or do you use digital art? And if you use digital art, what app do you use? I draw the initial thumbs traditionally, but I make the final animatics digitally using a program called Toon Boom Storyboard Pro. Is it harder to make a living off storyboards money-wise? Not that I've found in my experience. I currently make enough to live comfortably in a £700 a month flat that's close to work whilst also being able to afford groceries and amenities. But I also don't really go out much or do much shopping, so it depends on your lifestyle and living arrangements. If you plan to work freelance, I would recommend getting a retail job on the side as you may not always have work coming in and you'll need something to keep you going in the meantime. Sorry if I didn't manage to answer your question in this video, but I hope these answers helped in some way or another. If you'd like to see more of my work, please check out my social media, and if you're not already, please subscribe to my channel. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.